Hey, good morning. I've got this friend. We're close. We've been close for a number of years. Um, I mean, I think we're about as tight as we can be as far as, you know, knowing one another, you'd say. Um, I don't think I got anybody else like him in the Lord. And, uh, and he claims to be in the Lord. He, um, he says he's a believer, and he's even said to me at times, I'll tell you things, man, I would never tell anybody else. I'd never let anybody else know. And and I kind of appreciate that, having that kind of relationship with somebody. But the way this guy acts sometimes, and maybe I'm not the only one that has a friend like this or knows somebody like this, but the way this guy acts sometimes, and the stuff that like comes out of his mouth, and the stuff he tells me he thinks about, it's like and he'll admit it himself. He says, brother, sometimes I don't even feel like I'm a believer at all, and mostly I'm inclined to agree, with what I think following the Lord means, and the way this guy speaks and acts sometimes, and the things he shows me he thinks, just really leaves me kind of wondering too. But I know that if there's not mercy for him, there's no mercy for me. So I bear with him as best I can, and offer what I can to him when I can, and what I see, and what he's able to receive. He says he receives, and some things he says he's just not sure about. But we get to think about mercy, talk about mercy, and he shared with me, and it's something I've thought about too. It talks about that man who was forgiven much, but refuses to show mercy to the guy that owes him. Like he's forgiven $1 million, and he refuses to show mercy to the guy that owes him 10 cents. And what happens to him, and how he gets thrown into, he's handed over to the tormentors. The scripture says, Jesus says he's handed over to the tormentors, and he won't get out. He won't be released until he pays the uttermost farthing. And we both kind of agreed that there's even a kindness expressed there. There's a mercy expressed there, that there is an he's not lost completely, in other words. He will not come out until the uttermost farthing is paid. So there's this hope that somehow this uttermost farthing can eventually be paid, And so, we talk about it, we think about it, each of us, and have shared, like, what is it? What is that uttermost farthing? What is that thing that has to be paid, that thing that the Lord is looking to get from us, or needs to be surrendered from us, before we can get out of there, So we were considering that, recently, and both kind of came to like the conclusion that, or maybe not the conclusion, but the seeing how there's this motivation, there's this impetus, there's this working of kind of wanting to twist things just enough to have mercy for ourselves, but not have to show it, that we have this ability to judge, so to speak, so rightly, that we can judge where mercy ought to be withheld. Do you know what I'm saying? That we kind of twist it so we think we know enough now to say, well, yeah, I've got mercy, but this guy is, or that guy, or whoever is so bad, I'm in a position because of my wisdom, even call it discernment, make it sound spiritual. Because my discernment is that one is so evil, he doesn't deserve it, And so we find that, and we were talking about it and thinking about it the other day, that we twist this thing so that we can claim mercy for ourselves, but we have the right to withhold it from certain others because our spiritual insight is so great, or our spiritual understanding is so refined that we know they don't deserve it. And we've kind of come to a little bit of agreement that may be the thing the Lord is wanting to steal from us, that that's the payment that has to be made, relying on our own understanding, because if we claim mercy, how can we not show mercy? And if we have any understanding or any realization of how dead in sin and trespasses we have been, could we therefore rightly, justly, righteously deny it to even the worst of the worst, when we really know who the worst of the worst is, So we were thinking, that may well be, the hope of the uttermost farthing being paid is getting rid of that delight in our own wisdom, so to speak, delight in our own judgment, For what does the scripture say? Judgment without mercy will be rendered to the one who doesn't show mercy. And there's kind of a fear in that. Like, maybe I should be scared to not show mercy. I don't want judgment without mercy. I can barely, we both agreed about this. We barely bear God's judgment with mercy. We feel like we're dying. We can't take anymore, Both laughed about that, how often we've come to the place of, I just can't take anymore. No more, I've had enough. This is it, And this is where it gets cut off. This is where restraint gets cut off. This is where withholding, forbearing, this is where I'm going to let it rip, And, we sometimes laugh about how easily we come to that place where we're just so sure. Yeah, even God himself wouldn't put up with this, And so we have the right to let our wrath and anger out, But then we're reminded it's, the wrath of man doesn't work the righteousness of God. And how the righteousness of God can only be viewed through the mercy of Jesus Christ. We don't see how righteous God is except by that mercy. So when we want to let ours out like a pimple bursting, all that comes out is misery and pus. So I just remind you, if you, or ask you, if I can, if anybody comes across this, for any light in this area that, I can help this guy. Because remember, I'm asking for a friend.